Fabric warehouse is just a nicely structured way of storing data, but where we shine as detectives is the investigation. How do we investigate the clues lying within our Fabric data warehouse? Welcome, detectives. My name is Jason Richards, Microsoft Technical Trainer and Data Detective. Let's unpack the mysteries of how to write and run queries in Fabric and other tools. We'll also discuss ways for non-technical users to query a Fabric warehouse. And we'll wrap up our investigation by learning some common SQL methodologies for data warehousing. Grab your funny-looking detective hat and let's get querying. The SQL Query Editor in Microsoft Fabric is a versatile tool that supports Transact SQL, or T-SQL, allowing you to create and run scripts to query your data warehouse. It also provides features such as IntelliSense and debugging to aid in the development process, but it isn't just about querying, it's about managing your data effectively. Whether you're creating a new table, inserting rows into a table, creating object permissions, or executing complex queries, the SQL Query Editor is designed to make these tasks seamless. To launch the SQL Query Editor, you need to select your warehouse asset from your workspace. This step connects you to your data warehouse automatically without you having to prompt any connection information. After opening the Warehouse Explorer, there are a few ways to open the SQL Query Editor, and these are listed by numbers here. First, from the Home menu, you can select New SQL Query or select any of the templates available. Or two, from the Queries in My Queries folder, you can select New SQL Query. And three, also you can select the Query tab. No matter how you initiate a new query editor, a new query item is automatically created in My Queries folder in the Explorer, and any new query item updated is automatically saved. To run a query, type it into the query editor and select Run at the top of the editor. The results section shows a preview with a maximum of 10,000 rows. Your query results can be exported as an Excel file. To export it, select the text of one of the select statements in your query, then select Download Excel file to export the results. Similarly, the query editor offers the ability to save your highlighted query, either as a view or a table, each with distinct features. For both options, you must provide the schema and the name before confirming the creation. So, if I only know SQL, can I query the warehouse? Not so fast, my friend. The Visual Query Editor in Microsoft Fabric Data Warehouse is a tool that provides an intuitive interface for building SQL queries. It simplifies the process of writing and managing queries, especially for those who might not be comfortable with SQL syntax. How, you may ask? Let's look at the clues. The editor provides a graphical interface where you can drag and drop tables and visually design your queries. This makes it easier to understand the structure of your query and the relationships between the tables. As you design your query using the visual interface, the corresponding SQL query is automatically generated. This allows you to focus on the logic of your query rather than the syntax. So now our non-technical team members can use it to extract valuable insights from the data, democratizing data access within your organization and speeding up our analytical mystery solving capabilities. All you need to know is the logic of the query as opposed to the SQL to execute it. You can also save visual queries as views or tables like the SQL Query Editor. Querying warehouses with the Fabric UI is just one way. Sometimes we like that warm, fuzzy feeling of working with tools we're familiar with, like my trusty magnifying glass. Sure, I could use Zoom on my phone, but I'm comfortable with the magnifying glass. Good thing our endpoint allows us to use external tools as well. We'll call this the case of the third party. Obviously, the first tool is SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS. To connect to a data warehouse in Fabric from SSMS, you'll need your SQL connection string, which you can grab from your warehouse asset in your workspace. From there, you can launch SQL Server Management Studio, paste the connection string, and then authenticate. In Microsoft Fabric, you can authenticate using your Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory user principals, user identities, or service principals. But SQL authentication is not supported. But that's not the only tool we can use. Any third-party tool can use the SQL connection string via online database or OLDB drivers to connect to a Microsoft Fabric warehouse or SQL Analytics endpoint using Microsoft Entra ID authentication. Now that we've cracked the case of the third party, let's move on to some actual common SQL methodologies common to data warehousing. We'll briefly cover the basics and some unique scenarios to data warehousing. First, the basics. It's common practice to perform selection, filtering, aggregation, joins, and sorting using T-SQL. Select and where clauses are the standard for picking what we want to query. Because this SQL query doesn't have a where clause in it, we're asking for all the data in the selected tables. Because of the way a star or snowflake schema is implemented, queries to perform this kind of aggregation rely on join clauses to connect fact tables to dimension tables, and a combination of aggregate functions and group by clauses to define the aggregation hierarchies. Finally, we sort data using order by, which can be further defined by ascending and descending situations. One special case for data warehouses is how to navigate queries in a snowflake schema. Because relationships built between tables may have different keys, we'll often need to create an additional join to be able to properly grab that data. In this example, you can see that we need to call the join on the product key to join the dim product and fact sales tables, as well as the category key to join the dim category to product category tables. Other less known processes you can incorporate in your queries is to use ranking functions. These functions enable you to partition the data over categories, each returning a specific value that indicates the relative position of each row within the partition. Row number returns the ordinal position of the row within that partition. For example, the first row is numbered 1, the second 2, and so on and so on. Rank returns the ranked position of each row in the ordered results. For example, in a partition of stores ordered by sales volume, the store with the highest sales volume is ranked 1. If multiple stores have the same sales volumes, they'll be ranked the same, and the rank assigned to subsequent stores reflects the number of stores that have higher sales volumes, including ties, kind of like golf scores. Dense rank ranks rows in a partition the same way as rank, but when multiple rows have the same rank, the ties are ignored. And Intile returns the specified percentile in which the row falls. That wraps up the knowledge portion of our investigation. Time to jump back into the Detectolab 5000 to put this knowledge into practice.
Welcome back to the environment. And now it's time to do some SQL querying. So that's what we're going to work on in here. And we're going to do this specifically for the warehouse. There is a SQL Analytics endpoint for your lakehouse, but we're going to focus in on the warehouse here. Now, one thing I want to show you before we get into the actual querying is that we can work outside of the Fabric browser if we want to. This will work with third-party tools. Our SQL connection endpoint, our endpoint connector will work. I just wanted to show you where you can grab that. So under your warehouse itself, under more options, you can get it under view details. You can also get it under the copy SQL connection string. And then also there's properties that you can grab from it as well. So those are the places that you can get it. I won't open it because I don't have to blur that out a little bit later. But what we can do now is I'm in a virtual machine. I have SQL Server Management Studio open. I tested this already, but this is that SQL connection endpoint. And you see here that I am using Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication. It's going to have to be Entra. You can't use SQL Server authentication, and it's cloud native, so it doesn't have an operating system. So Windows authentication in this case won't be useful, but we'll go ahead and connect via this. And I already have authenticated. Usually it will take you into a browser for sign on into your Entra account, but I've already done that. But you can see here that in my databases, I have my sample lakehouse and I have my worldwide importer databases. And from here, all my tables are included. So when you get that warm, fuzzy feeling of working back in SQL Server Management Studio, then you may be able to be a little bit more comfortable working with Fabric warehouses in that case. But we're going to go back in here and work with the visual interface for this particular part. But now that you have that, just keep in mind that some SQL Server Management Service tools or SSMS tools you may not get full featurality with a data warehouse as you would with like a SQL Server. Just keep that in mind. There may be some differences between that. Okay, so let's next talk about visual queries. So we'll get into regular SQL queries, but if you are familiar with SQL, then that's just going to be repeat information. I think one of the cool features about Fabric and working with your warehouses here is the ability to use a visual query. So we're going to go into the warehouse, and you can see that up at the top here, I got my data, my query view, my model view. This will open up a SQL query, but what I want is a new visual query. So I'm going to open this up, and really this is a drag and drop interface. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my table, my fact sales table, and I'm going to drag it onto the interface here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to keep my top rows in here. Put 10,000 so I can reduce the number of rows that are being loaded into this particular query. And there's some other things I can do, like manage columns, transform and sort. So a lot of different transformation. This is for somebody that's not SQL literate, but just knows the logic behind how I want my queries to be formulated and can work with it in that case, right? So now I'm going to take my dimension city and we'll drag that on here. And then we're going to hit this combine button and we're going to merge queries as a new query, right? And then my left table I'm going to have as my dimension table. Usually in a join situation, the left table would be the outer table in this case, right? And we're going to align this with our key values and then our fact sale for our city key here. And then we're going to do an inner join on this one. So I can select the join as well. And then we're going to hit OK. Right? So you can see it even develops a little lineage here. Connections between here. Now I have 4 rows from this inner join option. And then with this step selected, you can also see that there is the ability for me to expand this fact table out. And instead of selecting all of these, I'm going to include some, let's see, I'm going to include tax amount, I'll include profit, and total including tax. But that's all I want. So I'm even expanding tables out. This is familiar on what you can do with Power Query Editor. And in the back end, it's developing a SQL select statement for all this. But what I'm doing is I'm just visually changing the way that this looks by using logic as opposed to SQL. And then finally, we're going to perform a group by operation. In the advanced settings, we're going to group by country. We're going to group by state, province. And we're going to also group by city. New column name, we're going to call this sum of tax amount. Choose the operation of sum and a column of tax amount, right? And then we're going to add another grouping. I'm sorry, we're not going to add another grouping. We're going to add an aggregation called sum of profit. This will be sum of profit. And then finally, a third aggregation of sum of total including tax. All right, and then we're going to do a sum on this one and total including tax. All right. And we're going to move that one because that was a little extra that we put in there, right? So we got country, state, province, city, our aggregations here. And then we're going to click OK. And now it's added these additional columns for me, right? Where I'm taking sum of tax, sum of profit, and sum of total including tax. So I'm adding additional columns into this. So now I'm grouping by everything. And from here, I can rename this query so I can save this. So I got visual query 1. I can rename this to sales summary. And I also want to show you this last feature. You could do this with both the visual query and the SQL query, is this download to Excel file. Nope. Couldn't translate the SQL on this one. I'll show it to you in the regular SQL version. But this is a great way for your users that may or may not be familiar with SQL language. If they know logically what they want to do with an operation, then they can create this visual query and perform it that way. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back into old comfortable new SQL queries here and just show you some options. All right. In fact, we'll close out this visual query and keep this one open. Now, again, I don't want to show you like SQL queries that we already know, but what we can do is, now where did I put I thought I had that ranking one in here. I may not have done it yet. I thought I renamed this, and we're going to rename this now. See, I can go back in here and rename these. I created a couple queries I want to demo for sure, but when you run a new query, it's up here. And what I can do is I can go into my tables. And if I want some quick query options, I can do, a select top 100 from this. It'll insert this for me and run it on my behalf. So there are some quick, I can create the tables. I can drop the tables. I can have a SQL query clone a table for me, and so on and so forth. I'm going to discard the changes to this. In fact, let me see. Oops. Okay, so this also gives me the ability to clone this without SQL code, which is awesome. But I also want to show a couple of these other queries, and then hopefully that analyze in Excel or the take or the export to Excel feature. The first one I wanted to do was cross-base querying. Now you saw that you can do cross-base or clone tables, but you can also perform cross-base, cross-database querying. Now this can be within the same workspace as what we're going to show you, but you can also do this across workspaces. As long as the data is in the same region, you should be able to cross warehouse query, or what we're going to show you is query in the same warehouse. The nuance, or what you need to make sure, and I reduced this to 1,000 because I didn't want this to run for a long time, but we're going to select the top 1,000 from all the columns in our warehouse. But what I have to do in order to cross-base query is identify the warehouse name, the schema, and the table that we're pulling in. So I need a 3-part naming system in order to do this, because I'm going to actually connect this to my lakehouse, right, to my dimension customer table. These are the same, they're the same warehouses essentially, so they should group by and connect properly based on our customer key value. And we're just renaming these so that I can, on the warehouse customer key and the lakehouse customer key. I know that those keys should match up. And then I'm going to order by the total including tax descending. And what this is going to do is it's going to literally go to my lake house, it's going to go to my warehouse, and it's going to join these two tables together. First time this runs, when the query runs out, it takes a little bit of time. You can see that took 13 seconds. If I were to run this again, it's kind of cached into the query, so it won't happen. But 13 seconds for me to join two tables that aren't even located in the same warehouse, essentially. The files are all located in one lake, which allows me a cross-based query. They don't necessarily have to be, but this gives me that ability to do that, which is awesome. And then finally, once I have this, I can take this and I could open up a query in Excel, and you can see what happens is that it takes that SQL statement, and then I can hit continue and have that open up in Excel for me. So I can run this query in Excel as well. I can also save that table as a new table in my warehouse. So plenty of things that I can do with this after I've run SQL queries on it. The last query I wanted to show was this ranking query. And I'm going to do this over the stock item. I guess I didn't save that last time. And it's not DBO-DIM product. It is dimension. Oh, this is also in my, I think I'm doing this in my lake house, aren't I? Because I had more tables in there. So let's go back in here. I think I might have it saved in my lake house. There it is. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking stock item prices from my dimension stock item table, and I'm going to rank them by unit price, right? Descending. And I've run several different ranking functions on here to show you kind of what happens with this. So what it's bringing up is the stock item itself, the name, and you can see that it's ranking these. My 3XLs, my 3 extra smalls. Some of these might look the same, but they're not the same item. There might be two different ones in there, and that's what it's doing, is it's ranking these by row number, right? So row number is our first one. So it's going to rank these in a row number format. So if there was 20 of these, it would create 20 different rows. You can kind of see this as you scroll down. Some of these rows have 3 instead of just 2, but that's what it's doing. Then we have our dense rank, right? Or we have our normal ranking system, which is going to include ties. So if all these have the same amounts associated with them, so they're all ranked number 1 because of that ranking system. They're all tied at that particular value. Dense rank, however, won't include ties. The difficult thing about it is that there's more than one. There's not as many items within this to kind of show that one off. And then quartile splits it up by a percentage that we're defining in here. So dense rank, just unlike golf where tie scores get ranked the same place, dense rank will ignore that and just include it down in a ranking list. But so there's some select SQL statements that you can utilize. Visual, we can save them. You can do visual queries as well as a drag and drop. And then we always have our warm fuzzy feeling of going back into SSMS. Let's head back into the studio.
Congratulations, detectives. We covered how to use the SQL Query Editor and the Visual Query Editor in Microsoft Fabric Data Warehouse to explore your data and solve analytics mysteries. You also learned how to connect to your data warehouse from external tools like SSMS or any third-party tool that uses ODBC drivers. And you learned some common SQL methodologies for data warehousing. Remember, the key to a successful investigation is to ask the right questions, use the right tools, and follow the clues. I'll leave you with this. Why did the sequel break up with its relationship? Because it was tired of being in a join that didn't select any meaningful values. Thanks for joining.